What's up, everyone? This is Jerrick with Allegedly Sober. And I just got off a graveyard shift, got about an hour of sleep, and my mind is just going and going, so I figured I would just turn on the mic and just see what comes out, see if I can take you guys to where I've been, where my mind has been lately. One thing I've definitely wanted to talk to anyone, just share with the world, really. I've talked about in the podcast a couple times. There's a book called A Guide to the Present Moment by Elkrief. And it's a book I read a while ago that showed me some very interesting truths about the way that your mind works and the way that it controls emotion. And in the book, there's just a very simple 5-step technique. The book goes into quite a bit of depth, but the main idea behind the book is the 5-step technique of basically how to overcome an emotion, and essentially once you overcome an emotion, you basically overcome the entire problem itself. If you solve the problem on the inside, then the entire problem is solved. And I'll try to explain that a little bit later. Now, the first step, obviously you have to start with something that you want to change. So you have to be able to kind of pick something specific that you're feeling that you want to change. Pick an unwanted emotion. So basically, you have a target to aim at. You have an intention you're setting. You have a direction you're trying to go. And that step is fairly easy, I guess, but also is probably the most difficult step, because you can't all the time just pick out exactly what the problem is. A lot of the times these things and these emotions and these thoughts happen so subconsciously, which means that we can't necessarily consciously notice them. They can happen so subconsciously for so long, and you become so used to them that they don't really get your attention anymore when you feel certain things. So it can be difficult to target exactly what you want to fix in the first place. And I feel like with this, it basically just takes time, because you're not going to be able to in one day identify every single negative perspective, I guess you could say, is what causes it, a negative perspective. And honestly, what we'll get into a little bit is a perspective that's not even true. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing for me, is because the perspective itself is causing an unwanted emotion. Okay, and so let's say we notice that, but then how do we get rid of it if we still believe it? You have to realize and discover on like I don't want to say factual basis, but a perspective of direct experience. You can directly experience the truth to it. And the awesome thing about truth is, once you directly experience it or see it or perceive it or understand it, it's very difficult to not believe it. Like, people can be in denial about things, but for the large majority of us, when you see truth, it's basically like our prime directive to latch onto it, I guess. Latch onto it and identify it and use it to add it to our knowledge base. And another thing is you don't get to decide what's true and what's not true. That's just purely based on the reality that's in front of us. It's not like it's up to my own free will to decide what thoughts are true and what thoughts aren't true. It's just a matter of looking at them in a realistic of a way as possible. All right, step number 2. You have to identify what thoughts are causing that emotion, essentially. And this is kind of just a basic quick step. What I like to do is kind of say it, you know, like write it down in a sentence or say it as if you were going to say it to someone. Put it in words so that it makes as much sense as you can. Like, for instance, if I got angry yesterday and I did something stupid, and now today I started feeling guilty for it, then that guilt would essentially be caused by the thought, it was bad that I got angry. That's probably the most simple way to word it, because that's essentially why you're feeling guilt, is because you feel bad about what happened the previous day. And essentially the thought that you're believing to be true in that moment is, it was bad that I got angry. So that's basically all you have to do to do the second step, is just put it into something that is very plain, black and white, easy to understand. Alright, the third step, this is one of the most major steps, one of the ones that takes some questioning and some effort sometimes. Definitely takes some effort sometimes, because you have to go down paths that you may not have tried before, and that can always be a little uncomfortable. Alright, this step is recognize that your emotion has been created by your thoughts and not by reality itself, and not by the circumstances themselves, and not by that person that you're angry at. Recognize that it's all your own thoughts creating your suffering. There's no actual physical connection between the what's happening, your external circumstances, and the emotion you're feeling. And that seems like a very drastic statement to say, that there's no connection at all, because there is. Like, obviously, if I were to win $1 million, then I would be very ecstatic, and you know, that's my outside circumstances influencing the way that I feel. But I only feel that way because I believe that $1 million is fucking awesome. You know, like if you were to give, say, Bill Gates $1 million, he would not feel nearly as ecstatic as I would feel. And that's because his thoughts about the money are different. So you can already start to see that it's not the money itself that's creating the feeling, the happy feeling. It's simply my perspective on the money that's causing that feeling. Another example might be if, let's say, I like to use relationships, because everybody has a relationship, and I feel like it's one of those things that everybody's constantly working on anyway. So these tips are very easy to apply. And not even necessarily boyfriend and girlfriend relationships, just friendships, you know, even if you barely know someone, any type of relationship. Because a lot of the times we blame our emotions on the actions of the people around us. And if you don't really investigate this on a very deep level, then it seems like it makes sense. It definitely seems like it makes perfect sense that you would react negatively to other people when they are reacting negatively towards you. But it's weird, because the way that we usually react negatively towards other people's actions or things that they've done to us, the way that we normally get them back, kind of, is by making ourselves suffer. You know, like, probably 90% of the people that I see that get mad at people don't actually go and yell and scream at them at their face. It's mostly they get mad at them, and then they hold on to that and basically use it as fuel to put that person in a lower position in your mind. And I'm definitely guilty of this. That's the only reason I know that this system is in place so well, is because I have been involved in it and using it for the past 20 years of my life. And it's only been in the past couple years that I have realized that this system of blaming other people is pretty much 100% backfires everything onto you. And these things, these little judgments and things, can be very hard to make the connection of how and why they could be harming us, because it seems like even if we are judging people for things that we don't do, like let's say I'm not a slut, but I'm judging someone else for being a slut, it still, I want to say, it filters out part of reality. It basically allows you to reject a portion of certain people's behaviors. And by doing so, you're rejecting a certain portion of people. Because there are people out there that do essentially everything. And when you look at the bad things or the negative things that you do in your own life, and you also look at, okay, how many times have I tried to stop doing those necessarily? How hard has it been for me to fix those? Have I ever been able to fix them? Then why do I expect other people to be able to fix theirs if I haven't been able to fix mine? It seems like there's kind of a bias there. You're more giving yourself more forgiveness than you're giving other people. And a lot of times people have that system backwards, where they give other people way more forgiveness than they give themselves. But it can become very easy to like give this forgiveness to people when you realize that it's not them and their actions that's actually causing your suffering. They may be causing you to have some sort of reaction, but they're not responsible for any type of suffering that you feel from your negative emotions. And there's a couple different ways in the book that Noah Elkrief talks about how to recognize that your emotions are created by your thoughts and not by your circumstances. And these can be very tricky to discover on your own. A couple interesting ones that I can think of right now is, let's say for instance you are a wife and you clean up the house often, and your husband always leaves out dirty dishes and everything all over the house. And you are angry at him for that. And you think that if only he would stop doing that, then, you would be fine. Your anger would go away. But if you take and that may be true. Obviously he could definitely do that, and that would help. But let's say that doesn't happen. Then if you look at your thoughts in a very factual way, then you can see that your suffering from that is not directly caused by the circumstance, which would be the dirty dishes. Because let's say, what if someone told you that he left out dirty dishes, but then you got home and there was actually no dishes left out? Then you would have been angry the entire time, but yet no action would have happened yet. And this seems kind of a silly example, because, well, someone basically lied to you, and so that's why you got angry. But even with that silly example, you can see that it's not actually the action itself that's causing your anger. Because no action has happened, everything has stayed the exact same, but yet you still feel extremely angry. And why is that? It's because in that moment you believe a thought that says, my husband did this and it's bad that he did this and he shouldn't have done that. Even though nothing actually happened. Kind of interesting that it can show you the real power that thoughts have, because in that situation it was purely 100% thoughts that created that emotion. Even though the thoughts represented a possible scenario, it was still 100% thoughts that created your anger and your suffering. And the fourth step is the one that makes the biggest difference, I think. If this step happens really well, then the thought is pretty much, and the emotion, if it just feels like a release, kind of like a realization and an understanding and a peace with it. That's essentially what this is for, to create a peace with everything, even the negative sides of life. Because you don't have to stop the negative things from happening. I don't want to say they're gonna happen, but they're gonna happen to all of us every day to some extent. And you can't control that. There's so many things in life you can't control. 100% out of your control. Alright, this step is discover that you don't actually know for a fact whether or not your thought is true. So going back to the first example of being angry and later feeling guilt about that anger, essentially what's happening there is you're having the thought, it was bad that I got angry yesterday. And when you have that thought, you see it as true. You don't see it as just another thought. You see it as an actual true thought, and that's why it carries that emotional weight to it. Is because at that moment you're believing it's true. You know, like if somebody came up to you in the streets and told you that the world is ending, China just launched nukes at us, we got 20 minutes to live. If you believe that person, then you would shit your pants. You'd probably have the most intense reaction you can imagine. But if you didn't believe that person, because they're just some random crazy person in the streets, then you would probably have no reaction or maybe even find it funny. Simply because of believing or not believing. So this is where the questioning really starts to happen. Because you have to question these thoughts in order to discover that you don't actually know that they're true or necessarily false, because a lot of the times you don't know that they're false either. But when it really comes down to it, you do not know that they're true, even though we have assumed that they've been true and we treat them as if they're true and they feel as if they're true. So kind of a simple thing with getting angry with the previous day. There's so many different assumptions we're making in that. Like we're assuming that because of that, there's gonna have a downward effect in your life, a negative impact of some kind. And see, but the thing is, you don't know that, because I can picture a scenario where you got angry and did something stupid, and because of that, you actually accidentally got yourself into some great scenario that you may not even have been able to connect the dots back to that original scenario. But because of that bad thing that you did, you're now actually in a better place than if you hadn't done it. So just by, and that's just factual observation. That's not even my opinion at that point. It's just, I can imagine a scenario where that happens. It may be less likely, but I can imagine a scenario where that happens, and I can also imagine a scenario where the opposite happens. Both scenarios could have happened, and we can't go back and redo it. So essentially what it comes down to is you do not know. That is the absolute truth to it. That's not an opinion or a perspective on it. That's the truth of it is you don't know. And this can be applied to many different things. And this one realization can help in a lot of different ways, in a lot of small ways. But just the questioning of everything that causes these negative emotions. Try to find what you're assuming. What are you assuming in that moment that may or may not even be true? It's just an assumption that you just believed automatically. Alright, so just to recap, I'll just go over the 5 steps real quick. The first one is picking an unwanted emotion. Aim your gun in the right direction, find your target, get it in your sights. 2 is identify the thoughts that are causing the unwanted emotion. So basically, get it in black and white terms. Because of this, I feel bad, or it was bad because of this. Very simple to understand. And then the third step is try and realize that your emotion has been created by your thoughts and not by the actual circumstance. The fourth step is discover that you don't actually know for a fact that your thought is true. You don't have to prove that it's false, but at least come to the discovery that you don't actually know that it's true. Oh, and I totally forgot the 5th step, but the 5th step is kind of just a further investigation, and this step has actually helped me sometimes. The 5th step is question the validity of any reason to continue suffering. Because sometimes when we see the truth to it, we still believe that it will be more beneficial if we suffer somehow. Like one example I can think of is if somebody died, and let's say your mom died and your sister was very upset about it. At that point, you may feel that you have a responsibility to feel upset. You may feel that it's actually better for that person that's in pain and better for the entire situation if you are upset. And it's everyone's got their grieving time and whatever, but there's no responsibility there to go through any suffering. Death is a very natural thing, happens to every single one of us. It's honestly kind of strange that it causes such intense emotional reactions, because it does literally happen to everyone. Happens all around the world, all day, every day, all night. And obviously it's the most intense thing that any of us will ever experience, or something like that. But yeah, question the validity of any reason to continue suffering. Another example I can think of, since this one's a little hard to explain. Let's say you had a job interview coming up, and you felt very nervous for it to the point where it was making you uncomfortable, and you wanted to know how to get rid of that. Because the thing is, in that moment, you might actually, even if you have come to the conclusion that you don't actually know whether this job will be great for you or not, because if you come to that conclusion, that will help calm you down a little bit, because you won't put so much pressure on the circumstance. You'll realize that you don't actually technically know which way is going to be best. I mean, you have a preference, but if it doesn't go that way, you can't be too attached to it, because you're not even 100% sure that was the right way. But a lot of times after that, we'll still feel nervous. And it's because, without even realizing it, we have almost seen it as more valuable to be nervous. But if you look at it factually, you see that the nervousness is not doing anything but holding you back. Like, if you were to go into the interview without being nervous, you would do much better in the interview anyway. Like, if you went into the interview and didn't give a shit about your boss's opinion, and you were just 100% yourself, as if he was just some stranger you met at the train, and you just, got in a great conversation with him, that would be the most effective way to have an interview. Not show up there all, uptight and care about what they think so much because there's so much weight on, you really need this job and you want it so bad, and then all of a sudden you don't even know how to talk anymore. You don't even know how to be yourself anymore because you've put so much pressure on it and haven't realized that it would actually be more beneficial if you just, I don't want to say stopped caring about it, but just let it slide, essentially. But yeah, I think that was basically everything I had to say. Thank you guys for listening. It's been really great being able to share my perspective with everyone. I hope you guys enjoy it. Stick around and try to get on the podcast. I'm about it. Hit me up. Get on the podcast. All right. I'll see you guys around. Peace out.